Second by Director Stevenson after checking her notes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Can I have some help? I can't ever get into this stupid thing. Sorry.
We will move on to item B1, public comment. I don't believe we have any requests for comment tonight. Okay,
Just won't let me see its thinking here.
so we'll move to item B2 in just a second after Jen gets her laptop up and running. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move to item B2. This was a request that was asked of Dr. Hurst by the city to come and present, and I said that would be fine. So the city has a few things they'd like to present to us, some attachments, and talk about a request. So come on up and introduce yourselves, please. I think I was just looking for Sean Logan, so that's what I didn't see Sean and thought, no, they're not here yet.
Second chair up here, if that's.
Yes, absolutely.
Then if you can, just make sure that microphone's on. We broadcast our meeting.
The city's water system plan to identify areas where that reservoir would work best, and there was a variety of factors that went into that site identification and selection process. And once we identified the areas that would work from a hydraulics and engineering standpoint, we looked at who the property owners were in those areas to see if there was potential to work out an arrangement with the city so that the city could move their project forward, and hopefully, a mutually beneficial arrangement could be worked out. So again, in that letter, we laid out some of the things that we thought were of benefit to the district if we were to partner on this project. And if you could parcel of land, those frontage improvement costs would be borne by the city instead of by the district. And in the letter, we threw out an estimated cost of $100,000 for those improvements. And in reality, the cost is a lot higher than that, but when the city plans to go and do an improvement to Lee Road, they could do the improvements to this intersection and probably get a lot of grant funding with it. So I have a more detailed estimate if you'd like to see it, like what the quantities and unit costs and all that we estimated that based on. But just in short, I guess it seems like a good benefit to the district if the city can help bear that cost and bring in some external sources of funding to help pay for it, as long as it doesn't affect the district's plans for the overall layout of that parcel. So I guess we're bringing our proposal, and I guess if you actually have an idea of what that parcel might look like, you could give us some feedback on whether or not that location affects your plans. But there is a practical safety and reliability benefit there, and potentially an insurance cost benefit. So those were a few of the things that we I guess, thought we could point to start the discussion with the board, and I guess want to take your questions if you have them, so we can figure out if this goes anywhere.
So you mentioned possibly the irrigation aspects of it,
Mm-hmm.
putting a pump station out there. Are they currently doing that with the other half of the property, or the Angel Garza property that's being developed now? Because I know my understanding is that the city has acquired the irrigation rights for that. Are they doing that in part of the phase now, or are they? Would that be the pump that would service that full 200 and some acres?
So I'll answer the engineering part of that, and I think Ann can probably answer the development portion of that. But from a capacity standpoint, if that's your question, with this pump station, it's basically the city has identified a service area for that irrigation pump station, which includes the school and includes that southern portion there that's currently being developed. And I don't, offhand, I can't trace it out for you, but it is not just for a single customer. It's for an identified service area.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we were discussing the water rights portion of that in the parking lot. And there's, do you want to comment on that, or is there anything really to say there?
I guess all I'd add at this point is that the city does hope to create an irrigation system.
The intention originally was to provide our own irrigation water through the district when we built there, and not having to do with the city. Whether that's legal or not, I don't know, but when we got to that, but.
So one of the things as part of development, one of the requirements is that water rights associated with the property would be transferred to the city. It's maybe a little unclear whether that means irrigation water or drinking water. But there is already in the code a requirement that the irrigation or the water
I
rights
understand
either,
with
okay,
the
be
drinking
transferred or
water,
paid
my
for.
understanding was that the irrigation water is separate, but that's just my understanding. I'm not I'm not an engineer or any kind of specialist.
So one of the other things we were, I guess Greg gave us a little heads up that you had some of these concerns, and so we were trying to make sure we could respond to them. And the with respect to the city's establishment of a irrigation utility, I guess some of the policies that would govern it have yet to be defined. And so, you know, the city has a potable water utility, has a sewer utility, and there's, I guess, requirements associated, you know, within the city of whether you're required to connect to those utilities or not, those sorts of things. So, I guess I'm not sure we can give a real concrete answer on whether that option would be open to you or not to be able to serve your own irrigation. But I guess one of the things that was we were talking about was whether, just from a facilities maintenance standpoint, whether the district's paradigm is, hey, do we want to own pump stations? Do we want to maintain them? Those sorts of things, you know, because some boards might look at it and say, you know, we're in the education business. You know, we don't want to maintain more facilities than we have to. So that's, I guess, trying to present that neutrally, in that we don't know what the board's desire is there.
And it'll change.
Yeah.
From my view, it'll change when it actually changes to if it actually changes to a facility, or when a bond passes, all those kind of things. My initial concern is right now it's being leased out to an individual who has his own water. He's providing his own irrigation water that's separate from all these turnouts from across the road somewhere. But I don't want to do this and have it further limit our ability to rent that ground out to anyone else besides that one person, because we have no access for the irrigation district.
I'm sorry, can we address that person?
I don't know, can you?
Yeah, I can. I spoke to the irrigation district today. And yes, we can apply for another turnout. The current turnout that we have existing, the only real benefit to it is it's already under the road. The gates have to be replaced, the weir box has to be replaced. And if we didn't have access to that, or the irrigation chose to feed us from another location, because there is water all the way around our property, and that may not even be the location they choose to feed us from in the event we build. I can't get a definite answer.
My memory was when we talked to Craig, though, when he came in here a while back, is that we have to be able to get another one of those, we'd have to make sure that everybody below us is taken care of, and it sounded like that was a whole bunch of money from my memory of when Craig, I don't remember why Craig was here.
Because of the bond.
Yeah.
We were
Because-
discussing the
because of the
bond
bond.
issue and then renting
But
this
he
property
definitely
to
talked
him.
about
The big issue
problem with getting
isn't
the
getting
groundwater.
the water, because
The canal's right
that
there.
canal's dammed after that after our property line.
Irrigation and drinking water, because there's a lot of Department of Health standards that go with drinking water. So anyway, that's not to say that you know, the city doesn't want to try and figure out something that works here if you have an issue that we can help you solve.
So you're saying water tower only, you're not talking a reservoir like a pond?
Yeah, so that's a really good point from a vocab standpoint. So from engineering, just, you know, drinking water systems, a lot of times reservoir and tank get interchanged, but for this discussion, tank is more appropriate from a vocab standpoint, yes. So they need a new tank.
So only a
can we
tower,
choose what's
you're not
painted on
talking a possible drowning location?
Correct,
Okay, thank you.
yes. So the non-pod actually will be purely a pressure system, so it will operate on variable speed pumps, so it won't have a tower.
So that's coming from the irrigation district water, or will that be coming from a different source?
Irrigation district water. So the city is calling it a non-pot utility because far off in the future here, if they build a kind of a high-tech wastewater treatment plant that has reusable water. We wanted to be able to use that into that utility in addition to the other sources available. So that's why we're calling it non-pot, but for the start, it would all be irrigation water.
So something that I think that you guys should research is what Craig told us, is that they're not gonna allow just a meter to meter the water that comes in, but they're gonna say you have to use every bit of water that you purchase, and you'll have to either hold it or dump it out the other end somewhere. And so just so, I don't know if the city's aware of that or not, but that was one of the things that was brought to our attention when we were looking at what we could do.
Craig,
yeah.
if you could remind me, I think we have one such system like that already that irrigates McFarland. It irrigates Kiwanis Park at the same time. And there's also a church that is attached to that irrigation system. And I think it's going possibly, like you said, it's just on demand.
And the city's tied into it all.
The city's tied into it also.
That's a
for
grandfather
Kiwanis
thing,
Park.
that they're
That's
not
the one that
allowing that
Craig
in
said was
future
the one
build
and only.
build-outs, I
Yeah.
don't think.
But it's a similar type of a system that could be seen used there. And I could see the benefits of a tower up on the corner for, like you say, the hydraulics, the water pressure, the firefighting systems, the sprinkler systems. You don't have to have your backup pumps in your sprinkler systems and stuff like that if the pressures are high enough. And I could see advantages like that to potential future building on that spot for us.
Have you read our land survey shortly after or before we purchased this property for that location?
I don't believe we have a copy of that.
You may want to check that
Okay.
and make sure that this land will actually accommodate. I don't know if it will without major modifications after looking at that. There was a test like 11 and a half feet deep, maybe it was 13 and a half at that location. It's like a 53-page report, which was just probably fun reading for you. And there was a test exactly in that spot.
Okay. So on the physical properties of the soil, or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, if we can get a copy, that would be helpful, because so we have had, I guess, surveyors doing background research on the property history there to see if there were any encumbrances or issues.
Also,
in that.
there was once a house there that was bulldozed into that location.
Okay.
That might
A
affect some
shop
things.
and-
And it says all of this in the report.
Okay.
Do you know the date that was in for board docs? You can just look it up. I can tell you the date
December
of,
16, I think.
no, because the report was,
That was a purchase. The report was like a month later, February.
January 10th of 2017, so probably a meeting shortly after that. And Strata did it. So there's a 10-foot buffer. What exactly can we do with the 10-foot buffer?
So the 10-foot buffer was just to illustrate that the crop circle wouldn't be encroached on, so that
Right.
farming could be continuing there. So the buffer would be non-existent from a property standpoint. It's just.
So we can build right up to it, is
Yeah,
what you're saying?
yeah.
Or put whatever we want there.
Mhm.
Okay, just wanted to verify that.
Yep.
How many acre feet are you planning on for the tower?
In terms of volume stored in the tank,
Mhm.
I can do the calculation if you want, but I can give it to you in millions of gallons.
Sure.
It's 2.5 million gallons is what we're
Okay.
planning on.
Roughly the same size as the larger one up at.
Yeah,
Lions Park.
the larger one is 3, and then the one in the southern part of town is 2, so split the difference, I guess.
The striped one is 2?
Yes,
Okay.
but it's taller than the other ones, so.
Right,
yeah.
right. So according to, not this image, but the other one,
Mhm.
is this the prelim or the site? Can you pull up the other one?
Here's the second one there, yeah.
Anyways, the improvements that you're suggesting, it looks as if, and I just wanted to confirm, the sidewalk is much larger on 14th than on Lee. Space that you put, I actually went to the site and measured everything out and marked it. So if you see marks, they're for me and my husband. This was just some fun Saturday events because I have to see it.
So it shows up pretty well on the projected there. It actually, on the printed ones, I think it's harder to see with the aerial background there, but the sidewalk itself is actually the same width all the way around. It's the asphalt between the sidewalk and then the lane there that changes width.
Okay.
And the reason for that actually is that east-west here, we had to line up the through traffic with that bridge on the east side. And so you still have your dedicated turn lane, and then there's also a specific right-of-way that's gonna be required there. So that thin spot between the sidewalk and then the new right turn lane is just the difference of all of those. If you have your total right-of-way width and then you subtract out the other lanes, there's more there because the right-of-way width is different on 14th than it is on Lee.
Okay.
If that,
If we decide they can have it though, Jen, they can do whatever they want with it, remember that?
Right, but just to make sure that sidewalks, well, I don't want to get hit for sidewalks later on and
Yeah.
something.
yeah, so
Also, right across the street is tie-ins to power and telephone. Would we be able to go across your property if that was our point access?
So I think any concerns, whether it's access to those utilities or even access to that turnout, I think the city would, want to work with the district to make this happen. So I don't know what form that would take, whether it would be in the agreement or whether it's in an easement, that actually gets recorded to the new piece of property. But and Greg's got something here.
The current, in the upper corner there, the current utility that's turned off where the old pump station used to be,
Right,
that's a Vista.
okay,
Big Bend is on the north side of Lee and on
Alright.
7th Avenue.
okay.
The power poles along 14th are a Vista.
All right, so whoever we decided to, when we decide to build, whoever we
Choose to
choose to,
go with.
okay,
Vista's on 14th Avenue, Big Bend and a Vista run down Lee, one on each side, and then Big Bend runs down 7th Avenue.
okay.
Just so, isn't that what that's for, is easements?
Again, it's just
That space.
This is sidewalk, and then that could be bike lane, it could be parking.
But
Between
newly
the sidewalk.
platted property would have a public utility easement for the power and the phone and all of those things, so they could cross that property along the streets, both streets.
You already have piping to be able to have all access to this without having to come back and ask later on for more property for you to put access to the water that you're putting on that location, correct?
So there is water main in Lee Road that they could tie directly right into. There's also water main in 14th. So
Okay.
as far as tying the tank in, there's no issue for needing to cross additional property.
The fire hydrant, would you relocate that so we could still have it? Or would you just,
And told them the city was interested in doing this and having an irrigation pond, and it would be on their property, and our insurance.
City to work together to try to defray some of the costs of our future construction and also help the community. So as long as it doesn't have a negative impact on the district, that's where I'm coming from. And I think there were some great questions asked and maybe a couple that need clarified, like the irrigation water issue, but
I could see the closed system and I know it works. I see Wade's coming up behind too. And I see this as a win-win situation actually for both the city and the school district on this. And the only question I would have is our current lease on the ground right now. I know it was only a one-year lease, but I could see it next year if it goes out to lease it. We could just subtract this one piece of property.
it actually wasn't
No.
included in the lease.
it's not.
So
It's not included.
So
in the
if you
lease?
look
This
at
was for
this
60
image,
acres.
this image is for, I think that, can you zoom out? I think that this is alfalfa, and so you can
Just a
see
corner,
where
so-
the, keep going.
If you could grab the other exhibit, it's zoomed out, the first exhibit.
See how it's lighter green?
Mhm.
The dark green is currently is in the lease space, and he has it in onions right now. So there is weeds from low weeds, I should say, all the way to the corner in that light gray, green, and all in the brown right now. So it won't encroach at all on the current 60 acres.
It's, how quick are you looking at doing this project?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible?
We have did you explain about the money? and stuff?
There's an urgency element to it. I don't know if you wanted to.
Go ahead, Jesse, I'll let you
Sure.
elaborate, and I'll fill
Sure.
in as necessary.
So the city's been pursuing this reservoir tank project so I got the vocab right there. And also a new well for the city. So there's, Ann referenced some of the city's efforts to slow the declines of the aquifer, use less of the aquifer water to water things, all this. So there's a lot bigger plan that I won't get into all the details of tonight. But anyway, the city's been pursuing a lot of funding sources to get their well 10 going and this tank project going. And they were successful in getting a couple of appropriations through the legislature. And in order to get those appropriations under contract, they need to have the site in hand. And that also applies to an application that they have to Community Development Block Grant. So, when we reference the city pursuing grants for roads, they're always pursuing grants for these other projects as well. And, when you're talking about benefit to the local taxpayers, the more of that external money you bring in, the more the community benefits. And so the urgency on this is that you would think money with the legislature is always very secure and everything, but the advice that the city has gotten from the lobbyists that helped them request those appropriations was that get those under contract as soon as possible, because until they're under contract, they can slip away. And we don't know exactly what form that might take, but the city really doesn't want that to happen, doesn't want that money to leave Othello. So the quicker this can happen, the less likely it is that money slips away. So so we're talking about $2.5 million here, which is a big chunk of that roughly $6 million project that we're trying to do here with the well and the tank. So that's the urgency element for the city.
My only concern is that irrigation concern. Other than that, I think it's beneficial for everybody.
Sure.
So what, are we getting kind of that same sentiment from all board members? So I think now would be a matter of your attorneys writing up some kind of a contract for our attorney to look at, and also understanding that the irrigation issue is a concern for us. So if the city can do some research on that, and also we make sure there's verbiage in that contract, so it would save some time, then that's probably what we're looking at as a board, right? And we definitely have a meeting in 2 weeks. We may have a special meeting before that where we might be able to put it on the agenda as well.
So Wade wasn't here when that came up. Just to catch you up on what the irrigation issue is currently we're renting that ground out to a farmer who part of the agreement is currently he's bringing his own water. He has a well somewhere else that he pipes into that ground. But we don't want to further limit our ability to rent to another land tenant in the time between now and when we build by giving up more irrigation rights.
Well, this actually, Tony, these would be our irrigation rights, our water that we'd be talking about using for this. In fact, funny story, just real quick, not to bore you guys. I know you got a lot on your agenda.
I figured you may have had more context.
But
so that's why
we found this out when Angel was doing his project, and we thought we could capture those irrigation rights or get them from them. It turns out, for those of you farmers in the room or no farmers, you can't transfer irrigation rights unless it's for that purpose. In other words, unless you guys or us were going to farm that piece of property, those rights don't transfer. And this is directly from the folks over the irrigation district. We were very disappointed in that because we thought we could capture some more irrigation rights, but we cannot do that unless it's for farming. So it
Community
should
garden?
Not, long way of saying it shouldn't interfere then with that.
Community garden?
It better be awful big one there. Brian,
Oh,
you know?
there's a requirement for the size of the farm, okay.
Yeah, right. But I'm not sure, that's the big Reader's Digest version of what I learned, but I didn't want to bore you guys with the details. So that's the answer there, Tony.
Okay.
And Tony, just one more question so that we understand and bring back something that works for the board. So was the concern primarily access in the interim to that? Okay.
The concern is if for some reason it didn't work out to rent to the farmer that has his outside irrigation water coming in, we want to rent to another farmer for whatever reason, we want to be able to have the ability to do that. And not say, well, we don't have any.
But if you're
We get
taking our
access to a
weir box
turnout.
is what we're saying.
So for example.
You're taking the turnout location.
There's a piece of property down on 26 going towards Royal City on the right-hand side that has no irrigation water, so that ground you may notice it just sits there and weeds all the time. It's owned by Mike Anderson. I don't know how he lost the irrigation rights. I just don't want to be the school board member who caused us to lose irrigation rights on a
As
piece
far
of
as
property.
the turnout, Jen, let's research that to make sure, because I'm not.
Right, that's what we're
Okay,
asking.
You follow what I'm
Right.
saying?
Research
I
research that piece.
I don't know how it happened, I just know there's a piece down there they can't farm.
Yeah, so
It's
if
probably not
there's,
great farm ground anyway, but.
if we can make provision for it in the agreement that we bring to you, then potentially that addresses your concern
Yeah,
there, so.
I think there's a way to make it all work, so.
Okay,
I think, great.
sure.
And I'll get it in writing from Craig, but my discussion with Craig this morning was, we don't give up any rights by giving him that weir box. We can apply for access for another one that we'd have to pay for. And the only thing we're really losing is the road crossing, because the gates and the weir box have to be replaced for anything that we would do anyways. So it would cost us a little more to add another one, because we would have to pay for the upgrade, the cut into the canal, the crossing of the road. The road crossing would be the only extra cost for us in the future if we chose to do that. But you already know the situation with the water. We're already going to be into it $150,000 to do anything anyways, so another $10,000 for a road crossing isn't a whole lot.
Yep.
But I'll go back to Craig and get something in writing and work with them on that.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
No, just a really quick little comment here while we got Wade here. Wade, I appreciate your time here. If you guys haven't heard, Wade is
Leaving.
moving
I
on.
heard.
He's leaving us.
I'm gonna leave quick.
It's been a great pleasure working with you. It has. And you will be greatly missed.
We'll miss this place. All the hard work the community puts into making this town good, so.
Thanks, Wade. Make sure you get a good person to buy your house too, all right?
No
Just down
pressure
the
on that
street.
at all, though. Right.
It's going up for sale next week, so it's just.
All right. Thank you for coming and
Thanks.
sharing that with us, and look forward to being able to work together.
Yeah, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Fantastic. You'll forgive us if we don't stay for the rest of the
The
We'll
next
forgive
4
you.
hours, what are you talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about, Jen.
I told
haven't
him at
looked
a
at the
meeting that
timeline.
we've had a 5-hour meeting before, and that everyone freaked out.
I just want to say one more thing. I've been working with the city on this, and it's been going really good, and we came tonight to just clarity. We want to make sure that we didn't want to bring a proposal to you in the end. Want to make sure that everything and all the questions are answered. So we will continue to move forward on this and get your questions answered before we bring a proposal to you for approval.
Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to item B3, board member reports. First is a legislative report from Jen.
Yes, so I listened to an NSBA, National School Board Association podcast today. It was really interesting about CTE. There was the Center for Public Education, and you can actually read this report on their website, centerforpubliceducation.org. They did some research they went to the federal government database that they had, and they looked at 2004 graduates from 2004, and they looked at it to in 2012, so the graduates would be about age 26. Many of those graduates went to some higher education. 12% of those never enrolled. But of those 12%, they wanted to look at specifically those that had career readiness. It wasn't about success in college, it was about career readiness. And they had those that had high math and science classes and had a 2.5 GPA and a certification or a license lined up or prepared for. They outperformed college goers because they made more money and were higher engaged in their community. And so I thought that was really interesting because the Perkins Career Technical Act, they have just, it was last updated in 2006 for the federal government. They reauthorized it in the summer of 2017, and so they needed to update to what is current issues because there was more money in programs to improve them. They wanted to do career guidance earlier, work-based learning, and those kinds of things. But it was more about local schools working with local communities and what the local community's needs were and how they became more successful using CTE and meeting those needs of their local communities. And I just thought that was interesting legislation issues.
All right. Thank you. Next item is, I apologize, this was supposed to be in the last board meeting, and it was not. We were going to go over ENS 3, discuss the 3 primary focus areas of ENS 3 to determine if we feel that the superintendent incentive bonus would kick in because of the results of that. And so I think we'll just start down the end with you, Tony. There are 3 areas, so potential for 3 different $2,500 bonuses there for Dr. Hurst.
Do you want to read those, or do you want him to go over all 3?
Yeah, I can read them for you, sorry. First, I'm going to read the contract verbiage. I forget this. It's going to do this for the recording. The contract states the superintendent shall receive up to $20,000 divided in increments of $2,500 per each strategic operation outcome for a total of 8 outcomes located in ENS policies 1, 2, and 3, should the board find the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the provisions of the relevant ENS policy and the district is making reasonable progress toward achieving the desired results called for in the relevant policy. We have already gone over ENS 1 and 2, and this is just ENS 3, the last one. And the ENS 3 states, in an environment of equity and respect, each scholar will graduate with the academic success and ethical behaviors to succeed as a responsible citizen and ready to compete in our global society. More specifically, in regards to personal responsibility and citizenship, bullet point 1 says, each scholar will have the knowledge and will take responsibility for his or her academic success. Bullet point 2, each scholar will participate sufficiently to enable effective learning. Bullet point 3, each scholar will demonstrate ethical behaviors treating others with dignity and respect. So we'll start with bullet point 1. Each scholar will have the knowledge and will take the responsibility for his or her academic success. Based on the monitoring report that was submitted by Dr. Hurst, we want to determine whether or not we feel that was met the expectations of the contract. So reasonable interpretation, and the district is making reasonable progress toward achieving the desired results.
For me, it's no on all 3, and our monitoring response document basically says that we felt like a greater degree of progress is expected, and we listed the areas. We actually did this report correctly.
One thing I would say that the monitoring response document is an overall assessment. It doesn't break out each bulleted item. So I think a board member could say, well, that bullet, we did feel that bullet had met the expectations where the other 2 didn't, and then maybe overall then we chose that. So there's an ability if the board member wants to. That's why maybe going through one at a time, even if yours is a no, that's fine. And then we'll see where we're at.
So the first one, I'd say no.
Okay.
I would also have to say no by reading the response document too, right now.
I agree. Progress is being made, but not enough.
Okay. And I agree with the 3 of you as well. So moving on to the next one, each scholar will participate sufficiently to enable effective learning. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
No.
Oh, yeah, you already said no, sorry.
It's
Ken?
no for me also.
Same.
Okay, and I agree. And then the last one, each scholar will demonstrate ethical behaviors, treating others with dignity and respect.
I'm glad that Chris's new contract isn't written this way, but I don't know how you measure that, but I'd still say that I'm going to hold to my original statement of no.
I would agree no at this time.
Same. Also, not yet.
Yeah, and I think for this one, personally, I just thought it was hard to measure. And so
Yes.
we did see things that are being done to try to help achieve that, but not results of it. And it's difficult to measure those results. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So Okay, so there, based on the findings of the board, there will be no incentive bonus amounts paid out for N3 policy. Dr. Hurst? So now we'll move on to item C1, required approvals. I will accept a motion for that.
I move to approve item C1 with the removal of, I probably should have done that earlier, but C1-3 to be considered as a separate motion.
C1-4 or 3?
C1-3, the 180-day waiver.
Okay. Is that the only?
C1-4, I assume should not be in there,
Well, it was in there, so that's going to take a motion if we want it to be gone.
and the removal of C1-4.
So you're asking for, so I'm clear, the removal of C1-3 to be considered separately in
Yes.
discussion, or
Yes.
to be removed from the agenda completely?
No, to be considered separately.
And C1-4, you're looking for that to be, is that to be
Removed.
tabled to a future meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so there's been a motion by Director Ashen to approve the required approvals with the exception of item C1-3, which he would like to remove to be discussed immediately following this vote. And item C1-4 will be tabled until a future meeting.
Second.
Second by Director Stevenson. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. So now there will be an item C2, which I know will be worked out, but we can start discussing anyways because all the information is here. So item C2 now is going to be consider approval of a 180-day waiver for the 18-19 school year.
Yeah, I just want clarification from Chris.
Yep.
I couldn't find in here exactly, I probably missed it somewhere, exactly how many days are we proposing to take out from 180 days? Are the kids gonna have 176? How many instructional days are we talking about here that we're asking for in the waiver? And is there some other way we can do this besides taking it away from instructional time? I don't think I brought it up since you've been superintendent, but I brought it up before in the past. I don't remember approving this last year, but
I
maybe
don't
we
either.
did.
Tony, can I get that back to you in a second?
Sure.
Okay.
Basically, I'm not really comfortable approving something that doesn't say how many days we're asking for.
Yeah, in the past, when this has come to us, it's just said, we would like a waiver of the 180-day, we'd like 176 days or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we knew exactly what we were waiving. So we can circle back to that, but the next one's superintendent comments anyways.
If it has to be done tonight.
Oh, there's nothing in our superintendent
then,
comments.
we need the answer. If you don't feel like it has to be done tonight in this meeting, then we could table
It doesn't. We can table it.
Okay, so we have put that as another agenda item, so
So I
there'll
would-
be a motion
I'd
for this
move
one.
to table
Item C2.
the item C2,
Sorry.
180-day waiver to the next board meeting.
Second.
Been a motion by Director Ashton to table item C2, the 180-day waiver, second by Director Stevenson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. So we'll move on to superintendent comments. It doesn't look like there's anything in superintendent comments for this meeting, correct? Okay. And then we'll move on to item now C4, which is the preliminary budget.
So it says motion to approve the 180 waiver, so, okay,
And then it
thank you.
got tabled.
Right,
Motion to
but it
table.
still says motion to approve, so.
She'll fix it.
Actually, we,
Okay.
yeah. We could have just not voted on it probably, and it would have just tabled, right?
Yeah. So
Got
is the
that.
purpose of this preliminary budget?
Okay.
So we should give some background a little bit, I think, on the preliminary budget, shouldn't we, Tony? As we were the only two board members here from,
It keeps showing,
Past
this
years.
thing keeps showing up asking me to vote.
It,
just vote yay, it's to table it.
No, it says motion to approve it. Can we hit abstain?
She's gonna reword it.
Okay. I'm trusting you.
Oh, okay, I'm just gonna hit abstain.
Okay, what you were saying on the preliminary budget, Mr. President?
Maybe we want to give a little historical context to that. This is the first year we've ever done a preliminary budget, correct? And I think that came from, I think it was your desire to make sure that we were presenting a budget along the way through the summertime for the public to be able to see that. So you scheduled it in our board calendar. So this is the first time we've had what's called a preliminary budget. We've always had a fairly finalized budget that the board was able to look at one meeting, and the next meeting it was approved. And that usually happened like the first meeting in August, then we approved it in the last meeting of August. So for anyone who might be thinking, well, this is the final budget, this is the preliminary, this is the start of the budget process and being open to the public with this. Is that a fair assessment, Tony?
Yep.
So it's very early on in the process, but an idea for where we are going forward in this school year. It'll get much more detailed as we go along, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, my only question, a couple questions I had on this is,
So are we having a presentation, or are we just talking about this?
What was your expectation, Dr. Hurst?
We
can do
prepared
whatever.
either way.
I just
think
Would the
ask
board
my
like a
questions.
presentation or
Oh,
just
okay.
ask questions?
If you want a presentation, I'm okay, it just takes longer.
You know, I don't mind a presentation.
Yes, I think yes, sorry.
I got outvoted.
That's two.
I figured you were going with the flow.
I don't know what happens if it's a 2-2 vote. It goes, do we just go to Dr. Hurst?
Sure.
No, go ahead.
So I'll make it brief. We have been working on the preliminary.
Can you mic
Yes.
yourself a little better? I'm sorry.
Is that better?
Thank
Is
you.
that better?
That's much better.
So we've been working on the preliminary budget based on the input that we have received from the meetings that you've had with Dr. Hurst and what you've shared. The budget, as it relates to school districts, it's prepared to provide the fiscal roadmap to ensure that your financial resources are in place to fulfill the goals that you've set for educational preparation for your students and to ensure that the district stays fiscally sound. I have a budget timeline. Today we have the workshop. We're going to continue to work on the budget. We do have to make it available as close to July the 10th as possible based on OSPI requirements. We're not there yet. We will be posting one in the next few days just as a preliminary budget. We've identified the initiatives. We've been conservative with the student enrollment, and we have some preliminary projections. So this year we've had significant legislation that's impacted how we're going to do business. The salary allocations that the state has provided are a result of the requirement to fully fund education, the McCleary lawsuit. That enhanced funding has significantly increased the base allocation amounts for all categories of salaries, certified, classified, and administration. There's also a requirement this year to establish a subfund, and the subfund is to record expenditures that are beyond state funding. So one of the requirements is that school districts are to stay within the basic education funding for basic education purposes. And we all know that there are additional costs that districts have that go beyond state funding. Athletics is one item that comes to mind. additional teacher preparation days. Teachers come to school 1 or 2 days before students. There's a need to fund that. So the subfund will allow you the opportunity to track those costs. And then there's a new requirement that we are to develop a 4-year high-level budget projection. And that, again, is to ensure that school districts are planning for the future and able to show that they're going to stay solvent, but able to keep up with the requirements. On the allocations for certificated staff, the state has eliminated the LEAP schedule. We've had lots of discussion about that. The base salary for the allocation is now $65,215. And there's a minimum salary required of $40,760 up to a maximum of $91,710.
So just to confirm, the salary range for the certificated, classified, and administrative, these are only the state numbers. These are not, have nothing to do with our current contract that we're negotiating, correct?
That's correct.
That's
It's the
base
funding.
the base wage.
I just wanted
ranges.
that said out loud.
It's
Thank
the
you.
funding model, yes.
Thank you.
The classified staff base increased from $34,180 to $46,784. Now remember, this is funding. The district has the opportunity to use an allocation where it deems the best use is. Administrative staff increased from the funding level from $62,199 to $96,805. And that's a catch-up because districts have been funding administrative staff. So now they're kind of paying districts back. And then the legislation also included 1 professional development day for staff. And that's over and above the 180-day calendar. So our certificated staff will no longer be funded based on their educational degree and experience. The funding is based on a statewide average, and the allocations, the staffing allocations are based on the number of students that are enrolled in our school district. Our budget initiatives are to develop a fiscally sound operating budget. To comply with state mandates, we have to do that. We also have to follow the state accounting manual, it's WAC. So we can't just decide to have our own accounting system. So we have that in place. The budget this year, the goal of the budget is to maintain status quo. So as you bring in a new finance manager, the budget will be in place to help that person get going, to help administration and staff maintain a straight course with the district. The budget will also maintain the required operating reserve that the board has established. And there's an allocation of resources to the food service program. It's going to go to the community program this year where all students will receive non-priced meals. And it's anticipated that your participation will increase as a result of that, but there are some staffing needs that go with that. There are also staffing needs that go with food service for the K-8 transition because schedules are going to change a little bit. So we're going to try to accommodate that in the budget. And then again, we're going to leave in the needed resources for the K-8 transition. Enrollment, I know that there was concern about enrollment this year. The overall enrollment off was 2% for your district this year, which if you go grade level by grade level, there's 1 or 2 students and it adds up. But what we have done is we've taken a very conservative approach and we have basically rolled up bodies. So if a student's sitting in a chair at grade 1, we rolled them up to grade 2. The difference in the overall FTE count is that you have a larger kindergarten class coming in than the seniors going out. And so there will be accommodation of a kindergarten teacher, and then the rest of the student FTEs will be, the district will accommodate it through existing staffing.
So this projection for kindergarten for next year, do you know how many we have currently enrolled?
335 FTE.
Are currently, I'm sorry, enrolled for starting kindergarten next year?
The number that I was given was between 360 and 380.
380.
Okay,
Well,
So-
that's,
are currently
but
enrolled.
from kindergarten roundup, it wasn't that much, was it?
Mhm.
Oh, boy.
So you've got your preschool programs that you glean information from, Head Start, and all of those sources say that it's going to be a very large class. And again, we've taken a conservative approach.
Right.
But if extra children show up, you'll just accommodate it.
So potentially another 20 over this number.
A potential.
Right.
My approach has always been to be conservative.
Conservative.
Show me the whites of their eyes, and then we'll budget for it, or we'll hire for it.
Well, one thing that's not in here, though, if you're just rolling kids up, is not the inevitable, unfortunate attrition that happens in high school from 9, 10, and 10, 11 grades. Or maybe it's a different grade level. There's 2 grade levels I know where we usually lose those 20% that don't graduate. But I see you're just taking the numbers and just moving them up a
Moving
grade
from
level
one to
there,
one.
so,
I think it's safe.
okay.
I mean, I would hope that it's safe. I think that
She's still rolling down. Because if you look at 11th grade, there's 251, and she put seniors 250, and 313 ninth graders. Oh, you went up on that one.
20%.
Are you thinking-
Or even 10%, that was 25 kids.
we can certainly be more conservative than that.
Well, what you're
No.
not doing, though, is looking at anyone who enters the district between K through 12, so they'll probably offset, but I just
Right.
want to see your
Yeah.
feelings on it.
We're gonna get our graduation rate better, so it's not gonna be as much
Right,
of an
that too.
impact.
Well, and this was the first year we ever had, where we overestimated what our FTE was gonna be. I can't remember that in all the time I've been on the board. This was a strange year where we had a lot fewer students than what we thought. So,
So for revenue, do you have more questions about enrollment? Okay. So on the revenue side, I just provided you a chart that shows basically where the funding sources of your money is coming from. And you can see that 66% comes from the state of Washington, and as basic ed. And it's also special ed and the other state programs. The overall increase, again, is due to the effort by the legislature to fully fund education. And based on our projected enrollment and the enhanced funding, the district will see approximately $6.8 million additional dollars next year.
The only question I had there is on.
Tony, can you move the mic?
On the levy and local non-tax. I thought 2.8 million was what it was projected to be before the tax went down
The
to the one.
Based on the
dollar
tool
and a half.
based on the tool that I used, this was the number that came up. And then there's also another $4 million in the LEA under the state funding. So your total is going to be around $7 million.
Doesn't that start to taper off somewhere in the middle
It
of the year,
does,
though?
in 2 years. So in the year 2019, the maximum levy that you can collect
Okay,
is,
so it's another year out.
well, this is 2018. So come October of this year, you're going to collect the second half of this year's levy at $2.44. And then in 2019, in May, you're going to collect $1.50.
Right, and this because my memory was 2.8 million is what we did, but maybe
I think it was
3
higher than
million
that, Tony. I
something
think it was
by
in the
this year.
3s. So maybe this is considering a
So
few
you're
months
saying that
without
you've
it.
taken the one thing of high and the one thing of low to come up with your 2.8.
Correct.
You're
Okay,
considering a few
thanks.
months where we
So-
aren't getting the
So
244.
because your school district goes over 2 calendar years,
Right.
There's the collection in the fall that is generally at 55%, I believe is the percentage. And then in spring, it's 45%. So this is a hybrid of the 244 levy and the 150
Good.
levy.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Okay.
that number was
And
correct.
my question with what the local levy money is used for, the new column that is created, enhanced expenditures, that's where.
That's where it
That's-
will be budgeted in the
That's where it
future.
will be budgeted
Mhm.
in the future.
We're not going to budget it there this year simply because it takes, all of the account codes have to be set up. And with your new finance director coming in, it will provide her the opportunity to establish the accounts as she and Dr. Hurst and the team want to have, how they want to be shown. And it's not required by legislation to budget to it, we just have to establish it. Okay.
Okay.
So the revenue that was budgeted last year was 55 million, and with the projection this year, it's an overall 7 million, and that is because the federal grants also have been enhanced. So you'll see all of those added dollars next year.
Just a quick question going back, is the LEA money in state special purpose?
Yes.
Okay.
So on the next slide, I just provided you a potential summary of what next year's budget may look like. And right now there is an operating reserve of, or operating cash on hand of about $12 million. And with all of the summer activities and professional development and summer school, we anticipate that the beginning fund balance will be $10 million. And with the projected revenue and expenses, we're looking at closing next year at approximately $10,360,000. That will be our target as we build the real budget. And that will ensure that you have a sufficient operating reserve so that you meet your minimum required balance, and then you have money available for any kind of an emergency.
So with that, we got a $62 million expense, and I believe our reserve is set at 10%.
10%.
So that took a $700,000 jump, pretty close with this new budget, how much we have to keep in reserve.
And that's something that as a board and an administration you talk about, because again, as the funding is enhanced, you don't want to get that required reserve so high that you can't meet the initiatives that you want to meet. So it's just, things go up, but does that automatically mean that you want to keep more money in the bank? It's a philosophical discussion.
Well, the policy also states undesignated reserve. And so you're just talking about overall reserve. Do you know
Correct.
how much of that 10.3 would be undesignated?
I will when I get the budget finished. But definitely you will have the restricted reserve or the designated reserve in a separate general ledger that will show that is your minimum fund balance.
So my only question, which is probably a silly one, but in the 17-18 column, shouldn't the projected ending fund balance be the same as the projected beginning fund balance?
that's-
Why is there $700,000 missing?
It's probably because I made an adjustment at the last minute and didn't fix it.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Sometimes my financial
very
brain's not as
observant.
good as I think it is, but it's usually pretty good.
I tried to be better.
So it's an error somewhere.
Better than Tony?
I did. I tried to be perfect.
Oh, I know you're a lot more astute than I am.
So I
But
have,
thank you. I'll fix that.
I have a general question. Do you know the legality, and have you ever seen in the years that you've done this, where a board worked into a budget and a transfer into capital projects for expected expenditures for capital expenditures coming forward? And I don't mean huge amounts, but if you don't want to rely on a bond passing for some smaller projects, to start budgeting that movement of money. Is that something that you've seen happen?
Absolutely.
So that's something I just want to bring up to the board that I think I would like to discuss. I don't know if the board is for or against that. As we think about going to K-8, there's going to be things we hear about that we have to do, but there might be some things as a board we feel like we should do that would be best for the kids. We need to talk about it now rather than later, because right now there's no wiggle room. But if we start talking about this, then maybe we can create some wiggle room, move some monies around. If we don't do it now, it's going to be too late. And I don't mean now as of today, but I think it's something that I'd like the board to start to consider. And it really just comes up to what that dollar amount would be. And I think if we were to do that, we'd also show the community that we're being good stewards of the money in when it comes to smaller capital projects as well.
So this is kind of a jumping ahead question then. On EL 7, Chris, you have your Teeter Crocker timeline. Timeline. You were coming up with July 13th was when you thought.
Yes.
Is that timeline still on track?
It's right around the end of July. So in my conversation with you, we're hoping to present by the next board meeting.
What you think the expenses for
Yes.
K-8 will be, including minor capital projects, meaning
Yes.
not a whole building,
Right.
some minor modifications to buildings that currently exist.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Careful with the word minor, because that insinuates minor
Minor?
money, and it
No,
won't be
minor
minor money.
depends upon the individual, what you
And
say.
myself,
Yes,
don't
I
think
would
we
agree with
should
that.
Make a move until we hear from the Teeters
Oh,
report.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I just, that kind of segues into that. Not that we're ready to jump there, but, right.
Well,
I
and
think
I
that
would
that's
just
kind of
say-
essential information.
I think it's pertinent that we have that information by the next board meeting personally.
Yes. Yes.
At the latest, because we're looking at then only a month to be able to start to decide and give information about what we want to do for
Funds
earmarking
and
for
all
capital
kinds of other
projects
things.
going forward. And I'm not against waiting for that result of the
right.
Teeter, but I want to be able to look at that, because I would imagine there's going to be things that I look at too and say, do we really need that? You know, this has to come down to a community decision on what we need. There's going to be I'm sure there's going to be some wants and some fancy things in there that we may not necessarily feel as a board that we need. But I just wanted to throw that out there to start the discussion.
Okay.
It's always good to plan. And then the next slide is just a summary of the potential, how the budget's going to line out. And you can see this kind of follows the same format that Gina prepared for you last year. And it shows exactly how the budget breaks down. So you've got your teaching activities, 80%. Your operations are another 15, almost 16%.
80%. Where are you
so-
coming up with 80?
so
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Instructional support.
In-
Okay, I was looking
uh-huh.
at the single line of
Yep.
4054. All right.
yeah, instructional support. Your operations budget at 15.6%, and then your central office at 4.06. The teaching and instruction are direct services to students. The instructional support includes counselors, nurses, psychologists, playground staff, and your building administrators include your program directors and your building principals and vice principals and their support staff. One of the things that I did look at is utilities, and I think I observed that the budget last year is sufficient to cover the projection for the utilities, so I don't see that increasing. So that's pretty status quo. And then on the last page, I just, again, if you want to go to the next one, I ended it with a summary of the objects. So the certified salaries, classified salaries, benefits, and then your materials and supplies. And as the main budget expenditure of the budget is salaries and benefits, I want to close the presentation as a reminder that 80% of the district general fund expenditures are for staffing. The district staffing expenditures reflect a commitment that I've seen of the district to provide services that extend beyond the school day and the school year to your students. And I think that that says a lot for Othello School District. So opportunities for student and staff are on the horizon for next year, and we're going to build a budget that will help you get there. Any questions?
Chris, for our community that doesn't know our master number cruncher right now, can you explain just that part? How and why, all the excitements of us getting her?
Are you referring to this young lady here?
Yes.
So we have the pleasure of having Rebecca Montgomery here. She's working as a consultant for us. She's been working with us for probably about 2 months now. It's been, I guess, very fortunate and a blessing for us. As we know, we don't have anyone fulfilling that office right now as the Executive Director of Business and Finance. So Rebecca Montgomery came highly recommended to us, and she's been working diligently around the clock with Amy Suarez. But in addition to Rebecca, we also have Holly Burlingame, sorry. And she's been working behind the scenes also in helping to support us in our efforts. So outstanding. It's
Becky,
great having
thank
her.
you. It's been amazing, all of the numbers so far, and I know more to come.
Thank you, thank you.
I appreciate the way you explain. You can get it through my thick head, and I don't have to ask a lot of questions, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks for your
thank you.
presentation. Doesn't look like there's any more questions on the board. Okay. All right. So item D1, this is the latest in the monitoring reports from Dr. Hurst.
I move
Typically-
to accept monitoring reports D1-1, D1-2, and D1-3.
There's been a motion by Director Ashton to accept all 3 monitoring reports submitted.
Second.
Second by Director Stevenson.
If
All
you-
in favor?
If we have questions from the
I
reports, you can ask
actually
them now.
don't have questions. They've been addressed already.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
I think that was kind of monumental as well.
It's
There,
monumental in this first.
That
one.
I
You
didn't
any
have a ton of
questions?
questions and stop you all. Right. That too. I mean, they were great documents already. Yeah.
well, I think I'm ahead of schedule too. That's amazing. There it is. There's the vote. Okay. Well, no items in policy review for this board meeting. In the future, the board remembers that will be, ends 1 will be evaluated in this meeting, I believe. Gives us more time to get back results from some of the state standardized tests. And now we'll move on to item F1. There's a need for an executive session for the purpose of reviewing the performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42-30-110, parentheses 1, parentheses G. Do I have to say that every time? The request is 20 minutes for the executive session. No action will be taken following the executive session. So we'll, if the board needs a recess, we will. Otherwise, let's just take 2 minutes then to allow everyone to clear the room. And so in about 8:22, we'll start the executive session.